It's about time I talked about the Deus Ex duology, and that other game and a half some French-Canadian jokers made with their ill-gotten Deus Ex license. I was worried I'd have to totally rewrite this video when Mankind Divided came out, but luckily it's the exact same game as Human Revolution, which saves me a lot of work. As always, I'll complain about everything, you're probably gonna hate it, and Reddit and the RPG Codex will get on my ass for having the wrong opinions. Don't say I didn't warn you. There's one thing seriously wrong with Deus Ex aside from the appallingly bad voice acting and the racism.
In the flesh.
It's that the weapons are boring. This fits the style of the game because it too is boring. That was a joke. You actually thought I was gonna bash on the greatest PC game of all time? Don't worry, I've got nothing bad to say about Deus Ex. Yet. But seriously, Forks, the utilitarian weapons fit the game because for the most part, they're optional. Deus Ex isn't about combat so much as exploration. There's usually a way through each area if you look hard enough. All the same, regular weapons in Deus Ex are a snooze fest because even after being highly customized, and even if you level your weapon handling skills, they still feel underwhelming. You'd expect the sawn-off and auto shotguns to be devastating at close range, but they're not. The assault rifle should be accurate and powerful at medium range, but it's not. The only weapon with any punch is the sniper rifle, which becomes the game's easy button for combat-oriented characters once you level up your rifle skills, because it has no scope sway, no reticle bloom, pinpoint accuracy, one-hit kill headshots, and the ability to accept a silencer mod to become completely noiseless. Broke like all your favorite YouTubers in about 2 months. That joke isn't gonna age well. This orgy of meh is somewhat redeemed by the super weapons. My favorite is the disposable law tube, just because it makes the standard issue GEP gun look like a defective paintball marker. The law tube is a lot like an invincibility power-up or a one-off magic scroll. It can get you through a lot of greasy situations, but is rare and bulky. The GEP gun is ultimately one of the most useful weapons in Deus Ex, since ammunition for it is shockingly plentiful and the endgame is chock full of robots and armored troopers. The plasma rifle is the only weapon in the game that qualifies as fun, and it can mow down a crowd of MJ-12 troopers like a semi-truck. It just doesn't serve the same utility as the GEP gun. They're both huge and you can't expand your inventory size, so taking both is out of the question. I also have to mention the Dragon Tooth Sword, which is a lot cooler in concept than execution. It's a great ammo-saving tool and a badass infighting weapon if you spec your character the right way. And it's ultra bland too. You'd expect it to snicker snack through enemies like a lightsaber, but it might as well be a truncheon. What kind of sword goes clonk? Plus the blade takes up slots in your inventory even when the damn thing is off, which I guess is a balance thing? For the love of God, JC, turn the damn thing off before you put it away. It cannot possibly be safe to cram an active lightsaber into a pack full of explosives and napalm. And that's all I have to say about that, because the guns in Deus Ex don't matter. For Invisible War, they did something a bit different and went with a universal ammo system, which gamers seem to universally hate.
I get it!
Universal ammo is actually a great idea in Deus Ex. In the other DX games, you have very few rounds for any one weapon, so if you get into a protracted firefight, you have to keep switching over and over. The universal ammo system is a cool idea because it allows you to pick the weapon for the situation and just use it without having to switch weapons over and over. It's a double-edged sword, since if you run out of ammo for one weapon, you run out of ammo for all weapons, but that's not actually a real problem. Think about it. If you use all of your ammo in Deus Ex or Human Revolution, you're out of ammo. If you use all your ammo in Invisible War, you're out of ammo. What it does do is make sure you don't run out of ammo on a particular weapon. In DX and Human Revolution, ammo for early weapons can become scarce as the game wears on. By the end of those two games, I usually have a fully tricked out pistol or SMG that I can't use because the game stops giving out regular bullets. What is actually lost with a universal ammo system? All you lose are different ammo types, and that's not a big loss because the alternate fire modes in Invisible War give more variety than ammo types in DX ever did. Invisible War added fire modes that weren't just weapons, they were combat tools. That was where a lot of the variety in the game came from if you chose the combat approach. Creative use of weapons. The starting pistol was the only gun that was a basic slug thrower. Invisible War's SMG shoots flashbangs as an alternate fire mode, which makes it the ultimate room clearing gun. The shotgun deploys smoke grenades. Combine that with a vision mod and you have a really awesome combat strategy. Weapon mods in Invisible War also radically change the way the guns behave instead of incrementing their stats by a few percent. Human Revolution did offer a nice compromise, allowing you to tune weapons with generic mods and then having each weapon accept one mod that changed its function in some way. This was cool, but it did mean that the only weapon with explosive ammo was the revolver, the only gun with a burst fire mode was the shotgun, and so on and so forth. Don't get me wrong, I like being able to fine-tune guns over time, but Invisible War's mods are much more interesting and have a huge effect on gameplay. The game has some basic utility combinations that just make sense, like adding a glass destabilizer and suppressor to your pistol to turn into an all-purpose stealth tool, or using EMP converter to disable traps, but you can also get crazy with it. Putting explosive fragmentation rounds and an ammo scavenger in an SMG makes it ridiculously good at chewing through groups of enemies. The most useful gun is the unique Assassin's Pistol found late in the game, which replaces the pistol's weapon light with a low-power scope. Put a refire rate and damage upgrade on that and it becomes a handheld headshot manufacturing facility. The unique variants of certain weapons are also a great secret incentive for exploring, like the aforementioned Assassin Pistol or the Hellfire Boltcaster that sets enemies on fire. All told, the variety of weapons in Invisible War is awesome. There aren't that many guns, but there's still a good selection of melee weapons, and the weapons that are available all do something unique. It's a different approach, using weapon archetypes that are more sci-fi to fit Invisible War's much more advanced technology. And the universal ammo, like reducing lockpicks and multi-tools into the same device, makes the game play much better at the cost of some complexity. Finally, we get to Human Revolution, a game that is basically a mashup of the previous two into a super Deus Ex. The notable hallmark of the guns in Human Revolution is their brain-strainingly bullshit art design. Bear with me here. This might just be the Square Enix logo talking, but Human Revolution feels very Final Fantasy. Those games always have an art major aesthetic to them, as if a huge team of artists are allowed to just go crazy with the world design, and the poor put-upon programmers have to fill in a game around an enormous pile of disjointed art assets. Human Revolution is much the same. Somebody with a mind for art, and only art, designed weapons, robots, and augmentations with dozens of folding flaps and rotating bits that collapse and reform, arm blades, sunglass lenses in the skull, and on and on and on. And nowhere did a writer or a military advisor tell them to just fucking stop already. The guns are particularly egregious. When you reload them, you get a sense for just how badly they would function in the real world. They look cool and there are realistic touches like a press check when you pull out the pistol, but they're all way over-designed. If this gives you the impression that I hate Human Revolution, I don't. I can turn off the sarcasm and just enjoy the punchy visuals and sound effects. Aside from the plasma rifle, which is pretty tame compared to DX's amazing fourth state of matter-spewing area saturation device, and the heavy rifle, which takes a stupid number of mods to make good or fun, the other weapons are all fun to use and unique enough to make it annoying when you run out of ammo for one. The only huge issue that keeps cropping up while you play is the lack of melee weapons, forcing you to expend bioenergy to use melee quick kills. The takedowns are cool to look at, but that's all you do. Look at them, instead of playing the game. Totally canned, pre-built cutscenes in which guards drop their guns so that they may better try to punch you, stand stock still or before they were patrolling or using a computer, where you and up to 2 enemies might phase into a wall because the hallway isn't big enough for the cutscene the developers planned the animations around, or where the main conceit of the particular animation is that a civilian randomly decides to roundhouse kick a massive cyborg who's just walking by on the street. Hey, I know Detroit is rough, but come on. And all of this taking place in a single moment in time so that a guard who should technically witness the entire vicious beatdown of 2 of his closest comrades only sees 2 bodies appear on the ground. You'd expect to see the fucking Langoliers buzzing by in the background. And on top of all of that, you get more XP points for tapping a single button than you do for actually playing the game. You even get a bonus for being expedient. What? How is running up to a guy and beating the shit out of him in hand-to-hand combat more expedient than a silent headshot from across the room? Expedient compared to what? Backtracking until I find a trash can to repeatedly bludgeon him with? Fuck you. Here's how I break it down at least. Human Revolution was released 8 years after Invisible War, which was itself only released 3 years after the first game. That's about the length of a typical development cycle. More importantly, Deus Ex and Invisible War were both developed by Ion Storm Austin, the good branch of Ion Storm. It's worth noting that when Eidos acquired the rights to the Thief franchise, formerly owned by Looking Glass Studios, Ion Storm Austin grabbed up every member of Looking Glass they could. It's important because Ion Storm had dick all to do with Human Revolution. Eidos Montreal, who developed Human Revolution, the Tomb Raider reboot, and the Thief reboot, are not the same group of people. Human Revolution is, at best, fanfiction, because Eidos Montreal aren't the original creators. Human Revolution might be your favorite Deus Ex game, but it's also not a Deus Ex game. It's a Deus Ex tribute. I'm seriously sick of this shit. But oh well, my favorite Deus Ex game is Human Revolution, my favorite Fallout game is 3, and my favorite Beatles song is Wonderwall by Oasis. Human Revolution isn't a bad game, it's a good game. It has some aspects I deplore, which is what makes me angry, but at least it conjures up some feelings. I'm angry because so much about it is great that I just don't know why such major missteps were allowed to go uncorrected. There is a clear right way to play this game, and it's the hacking stealth approach. Anybody who says the hacking minigame is a vast improvement over waiting for a bar to fill is way too easily amused. Watching the bar fill never gets boring because it's quick and easy and passive. Maybe it's a bummer to have to wait for 5 seconds, but that's a constant. It's always just a few seconds, and it gets shorter when your skill goes up. The hacking minigame in Human Revolution gets more and more bloated and fucking exhausting. By the end of the first playthrough, I was sick to death of the hacking minigame, so in playthrough number 2 I went for a more combat-oriented approach, and mostly I had more fun. However, my refusal to waste points on the hacking minigame meant I missed out on a lot of the game, because it's required for almost all of the interesting side content. A fair number of side quests require you to hack computers at level 2 or greater, which means you have to have extra points into hacking. If you don't have these points, there is no alternative like with the main quest and the other Deus Ex games. The focus on hacking is pretty clear since the hacking upgrades are 3 separate trees with many more levels than even the super generic energy upgrade tree. In the previous Deus Ex games, your options for exploring were far more broken up. DX had lockpicking, multi-tools, hacking, jumping, and strength for moving objects, and explosives as a last resort. Invisible War combined lockpicks and multi-tools, which, thank God. I mean, having separate items and separate skills for lockpicks and multi-tools in the first Deus Ex was borderline skill bloat. A lot of DX was skill bloat. Nobody ever puts points into environmental training, swimming, or medical. There are biomods for that. Any points put into swimming are completely wasted because you can just save up your rebreather units anytime you have to go underwater. Any points you put into environmental training are completely wasted because you can use hazmat suits to protect yourself or just heal the damage. If you wanted to be a technical guy in the original Deus Ex, you couldn't just pick one thing and go for it. You needed computers, lockpicking, and electronics. Combat guys could specialize in a weapon type, becoming very good very quick, but the technical guy had to dump points into way too many things. Human Revolution has made that a bit clearer by reducing it all down to hacking or movement. Either you put points into hacking, or you put points into strength, jumping, and falling. This would be super awesome, because I'm all for reducing pointless bloat. But because there are many a side quest that assumes you went for the hacking skills, other builds are boring. And the stealth. You can't get me to do a stealth run, because the second shit hits the fan, I prefer to fight my way out instead of save scumming. Admit it, your best stealth run of any given game was like 90% failure, and only because of the dual divine interventions of quick save and quick load did you barely eke out a fucking victory. One of the things I dislike about games that have major incentives to the stealth playthrough is that they often result in epic levels of save scumming, which ruins the flow of the game and thus the immersion factor. And the stealth is just laid out for you as plain as day. This is why every pseudo-stealth open-world map control game is so boring. Far Cry 3 and 4, Shadow of Mordor, Metal Gear Solid 5, they give you every tool in the world to be stealthy, and you don't even have to try. You get a quick silent takedown at the touch of a button, you can see how alert enemies are, where they're facing, you always know exactly how well you're in cover, you get the idea. There's never any ambiguity, and the best part about real stealth games is the pulse-pounding moments where you're not sure you're hidden, or you're trying to sneak away and you're not sure if a guard is coming up behind you. But no, all that shit's on my radar. If someone was coming after me, I'd know it before he did. And this is even before you start racking up the stealth upgrades. Invisible War is the only game in the series to not have experience points. This might seem dumb at first because it takes away the incentive for exploring, but bear with me for a second. The main reward for exploring in Deus Ex and Human Revolution is the items, or the alternate means of progression. In the case of the former, it is its own reward, and in the latter, well, you have to keep moving forward somehow, it doesn't really matter how. The XP is just to sweeten the deal. But what this actually means in Human Revolution is that you'll backtrack every time you clear an area to get all the XP bonuses. Sneak into a building via the vent shaft, yeah, but then before proceeding into the next area, you make a point of leaving the building by the sewer system, then coming back in through the main entrance, then looking around for any doors you might have missed. It creates a weird flow, where you don't really want to be exploring, you're just doing it for some XP. In Invisible War, you explored because it gave you a tactical advantage or hidden items. The game didn't have to string you along on paltry sums of XP for passing some arbitrary exploration threshold in some vent somewhere. You did it because you wanted to, because you were curious. And if you wanted to go balls out and play it like a shooter, it didn't lord those little bonuses over your head saying, "Oh, but you could be exploring." If somebody ever tells you that Human Revolution is better because it rewards you for exploring, you have my express permission to deck them in the face. It doesn't reward you for exploring. You explore for the reward. Do you see how this relationship works? The reward isn't incidental. It's not some nice item or a different approach. It's a payoff. It's a daily exploration wage. The same is true for books. You don't read datapads in books because you're curious about the world's backstory. You read it hoping to get a 200 XP scholar bonus. Yeah, right, that's how scholars work. Crack the book Elder Scrolls style and boom, now you're good at shit. Not to mention that Human Revolution gives you way too many avenues of approach to each situation. It almost doesn't make sense to level up in anything complicated like stealth hacking or combat when there's always an air vent to the next area. The same thing happens in Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, and to some extent in Dishonored, also by Arcane Studios. Each area has so many environmental hazards to use, spike walls, throwable objects, rickety shelves, bottles of oil. It just gets distracting. After each fight, you wander around and look at all this stuff you missed thinking, oh damn, it would have been cool to hit him with that. The whole action RPG versus action game with RPG elements is definitely a common argument here. And I have to say, Deus Ex works better as the latter. In the case of Deus Ex, the skills were just stupid. I'm sorry, but they were. There were a handful, a fairly large percentage actually, that were just useless, either because they were so specific you'd never need them, or because you could have a biomod do the same job better, cheaper, and faster. So that left you with a ton of weapon proficiencies or a bunch of technical skills. Having more than one weapon proficiency and still being able to pick locks and explore the levels was almost impossible, so you had to pick one weapon type and stick with it. And the weapon types were very, very, very specific. 2 or 3 weapons per category at most. Invisible War and Human Revolution both work better in this sense because you don't have to juggle 2 parallel progression mechanics. Then of course there's the hilarious concept of a trained agent for a paramilitary group not having basic weapon skills. Or even worse, that he could somehow be a master of 2 different kinds of sidearm but not be able to use a shotgun or assault rifle. Really? That'd be like if you could drive a sedan but not an SUV. Oh, I couldn't possibly. I only have points in sedan. I mean, come on. I love complexity in games, and there are plenty of games where it not only works but is welcome. But adding pointless complexity to a game is, pointless. Obviously. In Invisible War, you can max out your biomods very early, leaving you with a bunch of extra canisters piling up in your back pocket. That isn't an accident. You're not hitting a level cap or anything like that. Biomods in Invisible War are less of an RPG element and more like selectable equipment in a tactical shooter. The simple 3-tier system is designed to be flexible, so you can respec your character depending on the situation. You're not married to the first set of biomods you install until the end of the game. You can start with regular biomods and then switch some to the more specific black market mods to specialize for certain encounters. Another complaint often leveled against Invisible War was the lack of hub levels. If you are a person who complained that Invisible War has no hub levels, you can die in a forest fire. Invisible War did, in fact, have hub levels. Seattle, Cairo, and Trier, Germany. Deus Ex 1 had hub levels. New York, France, and China. Human Revolution also has hub levels. Detroit and China, then Detroit again, then China again. You only even go to China on the merest pretext, and then you keep coming up with excuses to stay there. This is me foreshadowing a rant about cheap nostalgia, so stay tuned for that. The levels in Deus Ex were a lot bigger, true, but they were also completely empty. Human Revolution's levels are big too, and often praised as being highly detailed. Wow, look at all the detail in these motherfucking levels. I've never seen so many of that book before in my life. Human Revolution's hubs are no different than the other games. Your side quests are cancelled when you leave the hub, and when you come back it's totally different. Basically, it's a whole new area with similar graphics. And the second time you visit Detroit and China, your options are significantly restricted. Wow, sounds a lot like Invisible War, doesn't it? If you thought Invisible War had no hub levels, it's because you either forgot or you are particularly dumb. If you haven't played Invisible War but you thought it had no hub levels because somebody told you, chances are they forgot or are particularly dumb. And you are especially dumb for stating second-hand information as first-hand information. Please stop doing that. Human Revolution also seems to try way too hard to make you think it's a true DX game, whatever that means. They were so afraid of making another Invisible War that they just ripped off the first game and a bunch of other games nobody was looking too closely at. Remember, this is just another in the long line of Eidos' fake nostalgia games. Oh wow, new Thief. Remember our old Thief series? No, I remember Looking Glass Studios' old Thief series. Eidos never actually made these games. If you had a vague sense that the new Tomb Raider, the new Deus Ex, and the new Thief seemed off but you didn't know why, that's why. They're fan fiction sold as a legitimate project. Human Revolution is to Deus Ex as 50 Shades of Grey is to Twilight. Chew on that analogy, it's gonna be on the SATs this year. The devil is in the details, sending us to China again, using a bunch of old characters like Tracer Tong's dad and Nicolette Duclair's mom. The game starts with the same terrorists and hostage rescue scenario, exactly the same setup and execution, exactly.
So Manderley wants you to pick an additional weapon, a sniper rifle, a GEP gun, or a mini crossbow.
So, do you want something you can use from a distance, or up close?
Well, it doesn't quite start that way. First it starts with the beginning of Invisible War, then transitions smoothly into the beginning of Deus Ex.
Facility is under attack.
Find out what's happening, Jensen. Hurry!
Richard?
The China level is a rehash of the first game. The headquarters building has the same matronly secretary outside your boss's office. You've got another nerdy tech support guy always in your ear. Your boss yells at you for going into the women's bathroom, just like in the first game.
By the way, Denton, stay out of the ladies' restroom.
Oh, and by the way, Jensen, stay out of the ladies' restroom.
In China, everybody calls you Guilo, just like in the first game. Every single line of dialogue is a reference to the first game. Every single email and datapad is a reference to the first game. The thing that pisses me off about this is not the game itself, but the fan reaction, which largely seems to be, now this is a real Deus Ex game. How do you fucking figure? Because they brought back the racism? Because classic Deus Ex music plays on the radios? This is cheap nostalgia at its absolute tawdriest, and it has some fucking competition. Adam Jensen is a better character than Alex D from Invisible War, because he has a ludicrously gravelly voice, a trench coat, and sunglasses, just like in the first game! JC wore sunglasses to hide his creepy glowing augmented eyes. Adam Jensen wears sunglasses to look cool. Let's draw parallels to the Matrix films. The first movie was cool, but Matrix Reloaded was trying way too hard to make sure it was even cooler. Now they don't just wear cool sunglasses, they wear cool sunglasses all the time, even indoors or at night or in the sewers. Callbacks are cool when they're done sparingly, but Human Revolution is just way too invested in telling you how Deus Ex-y it is. It's nothing like Invisible War, although it does have more in common with Invisible War in gameplay, but ignore that. We've got China and in-jokes on all the computers. You get a choice of weapons at the beginning, just like in the first game. Remember the door code 0451? It was in Deus Ex and System Shock 2. You loved those games. You can't make a callback to someone else's jokes, Eidos. It reeks of desperation.
Haven't you lost enough people today?
Why yes, Eidos, I've also seen RoboCop and Ghost in the Shell and Revenge of the Sith. I guess I shouldn't be surprised something made in Canada is so derivative. Another issue I had with Human Revolution is the weird approach to character development. Invisible War is basically about the different paths that the Tarsus recruits take, and depending on how you identify with them, what route you will take. These are the important characters, and the training level gives you a good feel for them. Then when you're out in the world, the first few hub levels give you a chance to meet them all again, see what they're doing, and start to understand them. When their story arcs conclude, you actually know these guys. In Human Revolution, Jensen may love Dr. Reed, but you and I do not. This is the oldest storytelling misstep in the world. In Invisible War, you meet most of the characters when Alex meets them, so your experiences mirror those of Alex. In Human Revolution, Jensen has all sorts of baggage that you can't get invested in because you never saw it. The game tells you that Megan and Adam were in love, but broke up, but still love each other, but no fuck it, the pilot chick is cuter, and all you as the player can think is, fine, when's the next cool stealth level? In Invisible War, Leo Jankowski, yes, the Leo Jankowski, is the aggressive overachiever who wants to be the best, so of course he joins up with the Omar. It's high risk, he gets to improve his capabilities with more biomods, and it pays really well.
2,000 per week, plus mods.
Ultimately, he doesn't want to get folded into the hive mind and lose his individuality, and you can bail him out.
They say I have chosen. They say they will find me when I'm asleep and complete the operation.
Clara Sparks is the upstanding citizen who follows the rules and respects authority. Of course, she joins up with the WTO and basically becomes a cop. However, when she's ordered to assassinate Paul Denton, she refuses because she's an idealist. You can bail her out as well. Billy Adams is the bitchy, miserable asshat who joins the Order, and I don't care about her at all. I hope she dies.
I'll kill you if I have to.
So this is how it ends? Okay.
These character arcs show you, the player, what's good about each faction, and then in a cruel subversion what's terrible about them. In Human Revolution there was fuck all character development. Characters would drop off the radar for a long time, only to resurface like nothing was up. I kept forgetting Jensen even had a boss, and then Seraph would show up again. The game drops vague hints that he's a bad guy or something, but it never goes anywhere, and then he disappears again. There was one point where Malik all of a sudden called Jensen a gross nickname, and then Jensen called her a gross nickname right back, with the implication that they're in WoW.
This concept of WoW confuses and infuriates us!
There was no warning that these characters were interacting in any meaningful way. What were they making out in the back of the VTOL between missions? Another thing Invisible War did well was that it gave you real branching paths in the story. In Deus Ex and Human Revolution, you follow the completely linear story, and in the last few minutes are given one of several ending cutscene options. Human Revolution took it to a ridiculous extreme by giving you a cutscene selector machine with buttons on it for each ending. Mass Effect 3 eat your heart out. In Invisible War, you can actually experience the game in two different ways, which creates a legitimate replay value. The main conflict is between the Order and the WTO, and you can choose which side you want to fight for. Probably one of the worst parts of Deus Ex is that you're forced to change sides early on. There's no real ambiguity. You're given the obvious choice between statism and freedom, which in pre-9/11 America was a pretty obvious one. In Human Revolution, it's the same story. The trailers for the game made it sound like you would have to choose between Seraph Industries' radical views or siding with the common man against augmentation, but you don't. Almost none of that dialogue is in the actual game, and you don't have that choice. Seraph is painted as an almost villainous character, but then it never pans out until all of a sudden at the end you have the option to completely renege on everything you did in the entire game. Best worst fake-out ending since fucking Pariah. In Invisible War, the choice is more nuanced and more topical. Now your choice is between statism and terrorism, which is a real conundrum. Invisible War has two opposing factions, and neither is obviously right. I tended to stay away from the Order because Billy is an obnoxious cow and I don't want to spend any time with her, but it's still possible to be sympathetic to their larger plight. And there are subplots beyond that. One with the Omar versus the Knights Templar, and one even deeper with the two rival coffee companies, Pequods and Queequegs. The competition between the two coffee companies mirrors the conflict between the Order and the WTO. If you follow the Coffee Wars storyline to completion, you learn that they're both owned by a larger parent company, which manufactures a fake competition to sell more coffee. This is a cool literary bonus, since Pequod is the ship from Moby Dick, and Queequeg is the harpooner from Moby Dick. If you paid attention in high school English, you probably figured this one out early. On the one hand, the WTO are extremely controlling, like UNATCO before them. One of your first missions for them is to burn down a greenhouse where a family is growing illegal, wait for it, food. Oh, how dare they grow their own food. But on the other hand, the Order turns an entire city into grey goo, and they follow a kooky religion of peace. And they blow shit up.
Now that is irony!
This brings us back to that delicious twist, that both the Order and the WTO are controlled by the same people at the top. Statism feeds terrorism, and vice versa. The more outrageous the WTO's control, the stronger the Order gets. The more destructive the Order is, the more control the WTO has. The game's truest villains are the Knights Templar, who are basically the Westboro Baptists crossed with Nazis. But I repeat myself. The conflict between the Templar and the Omar represents a different axis than the main plot. Individuality versus collectivism, and science versus the natural order. The Omar stand for unrestrained scientific progress, but at the same time push unrelentingly for the greater good, even though that means a hive mind and leaving inferior people behind. Like in Deus Ex, it's easy to come to the conclusion that none of these competing ideologies is better than the others, and the endings are brutal. The only somewhat happy ending is to put the entire world under the control of a supposedly benevolent AI and create the Star Trek ideal of perfect communism. Fuck no. Ending 2 is to keep the Illuminati in complete secret control, puppeteering the world economy and governments to keep everything in a state of ignorant equilibrium. That one hits a little too close to home. Ending 3 is to let the Templar cleanse all modified people and organisms from the world. Woo. Or you can let the world nuke itself into oblivion, leaving behind the Omar to colonize space. Now me, I love space, so I pick ending number 4 every time. So let me make some things clear. Is the first Deus Ex the greatest PC game of all time, as is often claimed? Yes. Yes, it is. Its sequels both make improvements, but for their time they didn't improve enough to achieve legendary status, if that makes any sense. Deus Ex was a masterpiece in 2000. Invisible War and Human Revolution are great in their respective years. At this point, I should make it clear that I like Human Revolution. It's a really good game and I enjoy the shit out of it. but it also offends me on a very basic level. The other thing I should bring up is all the stuff that sucks about Invisible War, because lord are there things that suck about it. There are things that suck about all three games, obviously, but I've done Human Revolution to death, and the first DX is such a train wrecky pile-up it'd take all day to sort out the good from the broken. So here's some stuff that Invisible War did awfully, some stuff that led people to unfairly deride it as an awful sequel. The first big one is, it's an Xbox game. That made the PC elitists angry right off the bat. These are the same kind of people who sent Bungie death threats when they ported Marathon 2 to Windows. But the whole game was optimized for the Xbox release, and that meant the PC version wasn't able to flex PC muscle. The HUD is too close to the center of the screen, and it takes up too much real estate. The inventory system and controls are simplified for a controller's limited button arrangement. That means fewer active biomods, and since you have to activate them through the menu instead of with hotkeys, they're harder to use on the Xbox, which sometimes means you'll just ignore them. Note how in Human Revolution this was taken to its logical extreme. There are 4 active powers, one for every direction on the D-pad, kind of like in almost every game made now. Most of the changes for Invisible War were from technical limitations. Invisible War has smaller areas and longer, more frequent loading times. This is because the game had to fit on the 64 meg RAM limit of the original Xbox, right? Nope. It's because the graphics are so damn good. Invisible War had an exceptionally pretty lighting engine that has nicer looking shadows than most games released today. You'd think that was a good thing, right? Once again, nope. The lighting engine was a mess, and by the time they figured it out, it was too late to start over. Perpetually pumping out a plethora of per-pixel lighting effects brought performance to a standstill on all but the most powerful hardware. And because the game is so finicky, you can't just throw modern hardware at it and expect it to work. The Xbox had a custom NVIDIA graphics card, comparable to a high-end GeForce 4 at the time, and that was the only way to get Invisible War to run. It played like an inebriated mule in 2003, and it plays about as badly on most computers now. The heavy-duty graphics of the game are what's responsible for the small levels. The game engine and the hardware of the time wasn't really up to the task of big levels and per-pixel dynamic lighting. I threw a Core 2 Quad and a GeForce 210 at it, and it still suffered frame rate drops due to the lights. I'm not sure I've ever seen this game run smoothly. You should play Invisible War because despite the technical issues, it's a great game, and you need to play it to understand the series in context. But maybe stick to the Xbox version. Invisible War was a bad PC game, but it was an excellent Xbox game. And that's not to say that the standards between the systems were that different. Invisible War just didn't fucking work on PC at launch. If the HUD was optimized a bit more, the inventory was less console friendly, and the game hit a smooth 60 FPS, it would have been an excellent PC game too. Invisible War was released in the dark times before the Steam Empire, when you had to install your own patches. The PC version has 2 revisions. Here are the patch notes. You may notice it's mostly damage control for the PC version, and it helps to get the game playable. If you've got the right machine to play it on and you patch it up, it'll look good and run reasonably well. It doesn't even crash that much. But if you're not interested in cobbling together a potent Windows XP computer, stick to the Xbox. The frame rate and loading times on the Xbox aren't great, but, hang in there. I'm not going to count the general pervasive early 2000s feel against it, because when it came out it didn't seem that weird, and, well, that was a dark time for all of us. I may or may not have spiked my hair, and I don't even have the excuse of saying Zack Ryder made me do it. One of the best things about Invisible War is that you can choose a male or female character. Alex D's gender really doesn't matter. It's a great tie-in to the first game. If you don't remember, at the end of Deus Ex you see more clones just like JC and stasis tanks, just about, 20 years before the events of Invisible War. I'm contractually obligated to play the white guy because I am one, but there are subtle changes to the game based on your gender, and the dialogue is fully voiced for each. There are also female guards and bad guys, because why would there not be? Did they make a big deal out of it? Nope. It was just a sign that the game had moved past the gravelly voiced badass who doesn't look at explosions. It was nice to see fresh-faced characters explore the world and learn things, instead of being cynical, hyper-competent ambulatory cliches from the moment you pop the disc in. Unlike Adam Emo Jensen, these characters did ask for this. They're actually in this situation on purpose, and it is refreshing as fuck.
What kind of assignment do you expect with that attitude?
A risky one, with a big salary.
The voice acting is a lot better too, because unlike Adam Jensen and David Serif, they don't sound drunk all the time.
That's impossible. Half of our contracts are government issue.
He seems to be eating something. Or perhaps he's a little drunk.
Seriously, why is the voice acting in this game so bad? This isn't live fucking theater. You can do more than one take. Who do you think you are, Noah Caldwell-Gervais?
His whole operation to the feds and explains the whole event over coffee.
It's weird, but every few years I start to believe the negativity surrounding Invisible War, and I start to doubt my own experiences. When I haven't played it for a while, the constant riffing on the game, if Deus Ex is obliquely mentioned, slowly works its magic on my brain until I'm convinced the game isn't that good. But when I go back and play it, I am shocked at how good it is. Every time I fall in love all over again, just like when I replay Deus Ex 1. Invisible War is the game I've played least in the series, but that's more due to technical problems than with the game itself. So the moral of this story is, everybody is wrong except me. Sometimes bad games get great reviews, and sometimes great games get a bad fan reaction. I guess there is no moral, just the simple lesson that everybody is wrong all the time, and that the real villain in this story is you. You, the viewer/reader who takes internet comedy way too seriously just for the sake of argument. Stop.
Now, Pritchard. I didn't risk my neck to have you lose it in a pile of CPUs and scuzzy adapters.
Motherfucker, you don't know what a scuzzy adapter is. I'm 3 years older than you, I work in IT, and I barely know what a scuzzy adapter is. I guess I shouldn't be surprised something made in Canada is so derivative. That's kind of mean, but kind of funny. Sorry, Canada. It's just that you guys suck and everybody knows it. Is it weird that I find the Deus Ex TV noise less obnoxious than Picus?